The land doesn't just belong to the Duttons anymore, now it's testing them. In Montana, the Dutton Ranch was never just dirt and grass. It was history, blood, and identity. Every fence post had a story. Every acre carried the weight of generations who fought, bled, and even died to protect it. For John Dutton, land was not a business deal. It was a promise. A promise to his family, to his ancestors, and to a way of life that refused to change. But Texas doesn't care about promises. Texas cares about power, scale, and who can play the game better. When the Duttons step into Texas, they quickly realize something feels different. The land is bigger, yes. The opportunities are larger. But the rules are not the same. In Yellowstone, owning land meant you had control. In Texas, owning land is just the beginning. Here, land is used, traded, expanded, and leveraged. It's not about holding on, it's about growing fast or getting left behind. And that shift hits the Dutton family harder than any enemy ever has. John Dutton starts to feel it first. In Montana, people respected him because of what his family built. His name carried weight. But in Texas, his name is just another name. The power he once had doesn't automatically follow him here. Instead of being the man in charge, he is now forced to sit at tables where others hold just as much influence, if not more. And that's something he's never had to deal with before. For the first time, holding on to land might not be enough. The real challenge begins when the Duttons are forced to think differently. In Yellowstone, their goal was simple: protect the ranch at all costs. In Texas, that mindset starts to feel small. Here, people don't just protect land, they multiply it. They turn it into money, power, and long-term control. The Duttons are no longer just defending something, they are being pushed to expand, to risk, and to change the way they see everything they've built. This creates a quiet but powerful shift inside the family. The emotional connection they have with land begins to clash with the reality of Texas. Can they still treat land like a legacy, or do they have to start treating it like a business? That question slowly starts to divide them. Some see Texas as a threat to who they are. Others see it as a chance to become something even bigger. And that's where the real tension begins. Because once you stop seeing land as something sacred, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes a tool, a weapon, a game, and the Duttons are now standing in a place where everyone knows how to play that game better than them. Texas doesn't try to take the Duttons down in one big fight. It does something more dangerous. It forces them to rethink everything they believe about power, land, and control. And the moment they start to change is the moment they risk losing the very thing that made them strong in the first place. The Dutton family has always lived by a code that never needed to be written down. Loyalty came first, no matter the cost. Family stood above everything else, even the law. In Montana, this code was clear, simple, and unbreakable. You either followed it or you were out. There was no middle ground, no second chances, but Texas doesn't work like that. In Texas, loyalty can be bought, trust can be traded, and silence doesn't always mean strength. And slowly, that difference begins to shake the foundation of the Dutton Code. At first, the change is small. It shows up in conversations, in deals, in the way people look at each other across the table. In Yellowstone, a handshake meant something. It was a promise you didn't break. But in Texas, a handshake is just the start of a negotiation. Words don't carry the same weight here, and that forces the Duttons to question something they never had to before. Can they trust anyone outside their own blood? This pressure begins to affect how they deal with each other as well. The code that once held them together starts to feel heavy instead of strong. Every decision now comes with doubt. Should they stay loyal to their old ways, or should they adapt to survive in a place where loyalty is often seen as weakness? That question doesn't have an easy answer, and it begins to create cracks between them. John Dutton, who once enforced the code without hesitation, starts to face a new kind of challenge. In Montana, his authority was absolute. People followed him because they believed in what he stood for. But in Texas, belief is not enough. People follow power, opportunity, and profit. That forces John into situations where his usual way of handling things no longer works. He can't just demand loyalty, he has to earn it in a completely different way. And that change doesn't come naturally to him. Beth sees this shift faster than anyone else. She understands that Texas is built on deals, not emotions. While others struggle to hold on to the old code, she starts bending it, not breaking it completely, but changing it just enough to fit the new world they're in. For Beth, loyalty is still important, but she begins to use it as a strategy instead of a rule. She knows that if they don't adapt, they will be outplayed by people who have no problem doing whatever it takes to win. Rip, on the other hand, feels the change in a deeper way. His entire identity is built on the Dutton code. Loyalty is not just something he follows, it's who he is. But in Texas, that kind of loyalty starts to feel out of place. Situations arise where following orders blindly could lead to bigger problems. For the first time, Rip is forced to think instead of just act, and that creates a quiet tension inside him. If the code changes, then what does that make him? As these pressures grow, the Dutton family begins to face something more dangerous than any outside enemy. They start to question each other. Not openly, not all at once, but in small, quiet ways. Decisions are second-guessed, motives are examined, and the unspoken trust that once held them together starts to weaken. Texas doesn't destroy the Dutton code in a single moment. It slowly reshapes it, piece by piece. It forces the family to see that the rules they lived by may not be enough anymore. And the more they try to hold on to those rules, the more they risk falling behind in a world that doesn't respect them the same way. In the end, the Duttons are left with a hard truth. Their code made them strong in Montana, but in Texas, strength looks different. And if they don't find a way to evolve that code without losing themselves completely, they may survive the fight for land, but lose the fight for who they really are. In Montana, the Duttons always knew who they were up against. The enemies had clear faces: land developers trying to take what wasn't theirs, politicians chasing power, and outsiders who didn't understand the value of the ranch. The threats were dangerous, but they were predictable. You could see them coming, study their moves, and strike back when the time was right. That kind of fight suited the Duttons. It was direct, personal, and built on instinct. But Texas introduces a completely different kind of enemy, one that doesn't always show its hand. Here, power doesn't just sit in one place. It spreads across networks, businesses, and quiet partnerships that are hard to track. The Duttons are no longer dealing with one rival at a time. They are stepping into a system where multiple players are connected, each one stronger than the last. These aren't just people trying to take land. These are people who know how to control markets, influence decisions from a distance, and win battles without ever stepping onto the field. And that makes them far more dangerous. What makes these new enemies even harder to fight is how patient they are. In Montana, conflicts often moved fast. When someone made a move, the Duttons responded quickly and with force. But in Texas, the game is slower, quieter, and far more calculated. Deals are made behind closed doors. Plans are built over time. By the time the Duttons realize what's happening, they are already several steps behind. And for a family used to being in control, that shift is hard to accept. John Dutton feels this pressure in every meeting, every negotiation. He is used to being the one who sets the tone, the one who decides how things play out. But now, he finds himself surrounded by people who don't react to intimidation or history. They are not impressed by his legacy. They care about results, numbers, and long-term gain. That forces John into a position where he has to listen more than he speaks, and that alone changes the balance of power. Beth, however, begins to recognize the opportunity hidden inside this new kind of fight. She understands that these enemies are not just strong, they are also predictable in their own way. They rely on systems, patterns, and strategies that can be studied and broken. While others in the family feel overwhelmed, Beth starts to adapt. She doesn't try to fight Texas like it's Montana. Instead, she learns how to use its rules against the people who created them. And that makes her one of the few who can stand toe-to-toe with these new players. For Rip, the challenge is different. He is used to dealing with problems in a direct way. If someone is a threat, you face them. You deal with it, and you move on. But in Texas, the threats are not always visible. You can't confront someone who operates through layers of people and systems. You can't fight what you can't see. This forces Rip into a space where his usual methods don't always work, and that creates frustration. For the first time, strength alone isn't enough to win. As the Duttons try to adjust, they begin to realize something important. These new enemies are not trying to destroy them quickly. They are trying to outlast them. They play a long game, one where small losses today lead to big wins tomorrow. That kind of strategy requires patience, planning, and a willingness to take risks that don't pay off right away. It's a different kind of warfare, and the Duttons are not fully prepared for it. This shift changes how every decision is made. Every move now carries more weight because the consequences are harder to see. A deal that looks good today could become a problem months later. An ally could turn into an enemy without warning, and the line between friend and rival becomes harder to define. Trust becomes a risk, and hesitation becomes a weakness. Texas doesn't just bring stronger enemies, it brings smarter ones. And for the Dutton family, that means one thing. If they keep fighting the way they always have, they will lose. To survive, they have to think differently, act carefully, and learn a game that was never meant for them in the first place. Because in Texas, the biggest threat isn't the enemy you can see. It's the one already planning your next move before you even make it. Rip Wheeler has always been the kind of man who doesn't ask questions. In Montana, that was his strength. He didn't hesitate, didn't doubt, and never needed to understand the bigger picture. John Dutton gave an order, and Rip carried it out. Simple, clean, effective. That's what made him so dangerous. He wasn't just loyal, he was certain, but Texas begins to challenge that certainty in ways Rip has never faced before. In Yellowstone, problems had clear shapes. If someone threatened the ranch, Rip knew exactly what to do. His role was built on action, not discussion. He handled things quickly, often without anyone else even knowing. And because the world around him worked in a similar way, his methods always fit. But in Texas, the problems don't come with clear edges. They are layered, hidden, and often tied to people you can't just confront. That alone starts to limit what Rip can do. For the first time, Rip finds himself in situations where force isn't the answer. There are moments where acting too quickly could cause more damage than staying still. Deals need to be made, relationships need to be managed, and enemies don't always reveal themselves in a way that allows for direct action. This forces Rip into a space he's not comfortable in, a space where thinking matters more than reacting. This shift doesn't just affect how he works, it affects how he sees himself. Rip has always known his place in the Dutton family. He is the protector, the enforcer, the one who handles what others can't. But in Texas, that role starts to feel smaller. Not because he's less capable, but because the world around him has changed. Strength alone isn't enough anymore, and that creates a quiet conflict inside him. Beth notices this before anyone else. She sees the way Rip holds back, the way he watches situations instead of stepping into them. And while others might see that as hesitation, Beth understands what it really is. It's adjustment. Rip is trying to find a new way to exist in a world that doesn't reward the same kind of loyalty and force that once defined him. But that adjustment comes at a cost. There are moments where Rip wants to act, where every instinct tells him to do what he has always done. To remove the threat, to protect the family in the most direct way possible. But now, those instincts are being questioned, not just by others, but by the situation itself. And that creates tension. Because if Rip can't rely on his instincts, then what can he rely on? John Dutton also feels this change in Rip, even if he doesn't say it out loud. For years, Rip has been his most trusted weapon, the one person he never had to worry about. But in Texas, even John begins to understand that sending Rip to solve a problem might not always work the way it used to. And that realization is difficult for both of them, because it means the system they built together is no longer enough. At the same time, Rip is forced to learn something new: control. Not the kind of control that comes from power or fear, but the kind that comes from patience. He has to pick his moments carefully, understand situations before acting, and sometimes do nothing at all. And for a man like Rip, doing nothing can feel like losing. But this change also opens a different path for him, one that doesn't erase who he is, but reshapes it. Instead of being just the enforcer, Rip starts to become something more, someone who understands when to act and when to wait, someone who can still protect the family, but in ways that fit this new world. It's not an easy transition, and it doesn't happen all at once. It's slow, uncomfortable, and filled with moments of doubt. Texas doesn't break Rip Wheeler. It forces him to evolve. It takes the one thing he has always relied on, his certainty, and replaces it with something far more complex. And the real question is not whether Rip can still protect the Duttons. The question is whether he can become the kind of man this new world requires, without losing the man he has always been.